Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back to another Hands-On with Maxon Cinema 4D Level Up Workshop Part 2. My name's Ellie and I'm a trainer at Maxon, and I'm joined once again by my very good friend. How's it going, Matt?
It's going well. It's hot today in the UK. This is something
hot.
that we're not used to. There's weather outside and it's warm.
There's a big yellow thing in the sky, which
I know, and the sky is a strange blue colour.
What is
Very odd.
this? Also, hey to everyone who's already saying hello in the questions area. So hey to Mohammed, Charles, Bernd, Demetrios, James, Ahmed. It's lovely to see you guys, and for everyone else who's seeing us, Anders, Lucas. Yeah, thanks for joining us on this, on this C4D Level Up Workshop. So let's get into what we're going to be doing. So I'm not going to do that big whole introduction that we did last week, but I am going to talk a little bit about the stuff in case someone wasn't here last week, or in case this is the first time you're ever watching one of our sessions. So the idea of this specific workshop and this specific series of sessions is to boost Cinema 4D artists onto the next level of their 3D journey. And we're working inside of Cinema 4D version 26 and Redshift version 3.5. So those are kind of the key things that we're going to be diving into over the next 6 weeks. Here is a brief outline of the course overview. So as you can see, we split this into 6 different parts with the idea of working with a particular topic each week. So last week we looked at S26 for the first time and sort of had a look at the new tools. Matt went into some great polygonal modeling stuff. And then we had a first look at Redshift, and in particular Redshift 3.5. And so if you did miss that, that is already uploaded on the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. And it's also timestamped thanks to the amazing Dr. Sassy. So I want to shout him out and say thank you so much for doing that. Those are really invaluable. And yeah, so today, working with volumes, part 2. It's going to be fun. It's going to be good. It's something that we didn't manage to get to when we ran the beginners course, and that was why we wanted to make sure that we fit it into this new kind of level up workshop. Before we get into what we're going to be actually covering on today's session, here's some extra stuff. And we went through this in loads of detail at the start of last week's session, so I'll just do a quick recap version. You guys have permanent access. All of these sessions are recorded and they get uploaded onto the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. We have a specific playlist called Hands-On. They could all be found in there, along with the beginners workshop, along with all the other hands-on workshops that we do, like we did rigging recently. We've done another one in Redshift in February. And yeah, so you guys can find that. All it is, just search Maxon Training Team in YouTube and you'll find our channel. And you also have access to all of the project files throughout this entire workshop. So pretty much everything and anything that we're working on over the next 6 weeks has been uploaded onto the Dropbox link. Anything else that we work on, we will, if there's a particular scene that isn't on there that we've happened to kind of do and cover, just let us know and we can upload that as well. So what we'll do, we'll hopefully try and add more and more project files over the next few weeks for the later weeks as well. A lot of you have been kind of emailing us about the trial activation or extension, which is great. We've done a whole bunch of them. I'm not necessarily replying to your emails, and I'm really sorry about that, but I am definitely doing them. If you haven't activated your trial, this is like a big thing at the moment. If you haven't activated your trial on your email or on your Maxon account, we can't actually extend the trial. So you do need to make sure you do that, and then always make sure that you give us the correct email for your Maxon account to extend that trial as well. Those are like the main things, because we can't activate a trial that isn't there. Yeah, so all the other stuff that we've already kind of gone through, all this information, useful links, course overview, etc., all can be found in the handout section of GoToWebinar. So let's get into what we're actually going to be covering today. As we said, part 2 is working with volumes, and volumes is a very broad topic, especially when we look at both Cinema 4D and Redshift. And so these are the specific things that we're going to be covering inside of volumes. So the first thing we're going to be doing is actually looking at the volume builder and the volume mesher and how that workflow works. We're then going to be modeling using the SDF modes. There are a couple of different modes inside the volume builder. We have SDF, we have fog, we have vector, and we're going to be looking at the first 2, and then we might get to vector later on in this workshop. And then we're going to do the first part of the kind of project-based practical workflow, which is modeling a Light Saber. And so Matt's going to be taking us through that. And I believe we're also going to be taking suggestions and ideas of what to add next to the Light Saber, which I think is pretty cool. So have a think and bear some things in mind. And then sort of the second half of this session, we're going to be looking at what's called fog volumes. And inside the volume builder, we have a mode called fog mode, and we can use it to create our own type of fog volumes. So we're going to start off by creating like fluffy clouds, and then we're going to use filters inside of the volume builder to add more detail, control density, etc. And then we're going to be rendering all of this inside of Redshift using Redshift volumes. And that's like a really fun, interesting workflow. And then we're going to be adding some fog to our Light Saber model that we've just created. And then if there's some time at the end, I know that we love to run over and we love to try and cram as much as possible into these sessions. We will then look at working with pre-made VDB files, for example, from Turbulence or XParticles, taking the channel data and use that inside of the Redshift volume object and the Redshift volume material to create smoke and fire. However, if we don't get around to this, but it's something that you do want to know, don't worry, I'll make sure I fit it into week 6, which is kind of specifically about Redshift. So, as I said, I wanted to do this intro really quickly so we can get into all of this amazing stuff that we're going to be doing. And don't forget, we have a questions area. So if you've never been part of our sessions before, inside of the GoToWebinar interface, there is a questions area. And you can just give us a shout out, say, hey, tell us where you're from, or ask your questions in there. And what we'll do, me and Matt will be answering them live, or we'll be answering them in the background if we can as well. So we want to try and make it interactive as possible. And also, hey to everyone else in the chat. So we've got Sean, we've got Eric, Akim, Ryan, Michael, Chris, Arnold, Gray, Mimo, Bill, James. It's so nice to have you all on here live with us. I know it's early for some people, so we definitely do appreciate you being here with us. Cool. So Matt, are we ready to get into it? I kept it under 10 minutes. New target.
You did? Well done.
Yes.
We've ran through that as fast as we could. It's like, and no matter what happens, we will still probably run over. I mean,
we probably will. It's not a Maxon live session if you don't run over. And those are the rules.
That's it. Absolutely. Okay. Yes. Throw the screen at me.
I will chuck it over to you, and then yeah, we can get into some cool volume builder stuff. And yeah, remember, ask your questions in that area, and then we'll be sure I'll be asking and answering them live with Matt as well.
Yep. Okay, so obligatory question, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Huzzah. So Cinema 4D, of course. So I love volume building. It's kind of revolutionized my workflow a bit. Can you still see me? Hello?
Yep, we can see you. Sorry, I'd muted myself. Yeah, we can.
Oh,
I've
sorry,
switched my
something
camera
strange
off,
happened. My screen did something funny, and I just wondered whether or not I'd been booted.
You're here, don't worry.
That's okay, that's all right. Yeah, so I love volume modeling. I remember when we brought it in a couple of versions ago, and I was like, I don't know what this is, I don't get it. And then I played with it, and then I understood what it did, and now I went, my God, I don't know how to model without this now, particularly for certain areas of things that I model for. For example, I model a lot for 3D printing, and this is a brilliant way of being able to smash things together, add files, move things together, but also ensure a kind of watertight block that I know that I can print, particularly as well with being able to print things that are much larger than the print volume of my printer, and ensuring that things lock together because I can minus one shape away from another, and so on and so forth. So I really do love volume modeling, and I was sad not to be able to shove it into the beginner's course, but that's why I made sure that we could do it with this one. So what is volume modeling, I hear you say? Well, it turns objects into a volume. So let me get my cube, huzzah, and then let me put it in a volume builder. Now, what a volume builder does, as you can see, one is not linked with the other yet, but a volume builder turns an object that you put inside of it into what they call voxels, which are effectively volume pixels, 3D pixels. So let me shove the cube in the volume builder, and you can see I get a really bad version of a Minecraft cube with anti-aliasing that would make anybody cry. But what we're actually looking at is a representation of a voxel or voxels that go across here. So each voxel in this is 10 centimeters, and I think I should say in theory there should be 20 of those across. So let me just let me make each voxel 20 centimeters, and then we can see 10. Yeah, there you go. So it's 10 by 10. Because what it's done, it's taken a 200 centimeter cube, divided it by 20, which gives me 10 voxels. And voxels don't actually exist. So if I render, boom, ta-da, they don't exist and you can't see anything. It's an amazing feature, unless of course you do fog rendering, fog textures, but we'll get to that later. So this is taking 3D pixels, voxels, and understanding the volume of this shape. Now, what's the point of doing this, I hear you say, if you can't see them? Well, what you can do, you can put a volume mesher into the scene and put your volume builder in your volume mesher to create a 3D object. But Matt, you could have just done that with a cube and rounded the edges. Yes, I could have done. You're absolutely right. But what I couldn't have done is then add a sphere to this, have it sticking out, and put it in the volume builder as well, which then merges the two together in a exceptionally gooey mess. And the gooiness, the lack of detail, is caused by the number of, or the voxel size. It's a bit like resolution in a picture. If you have a picture that's 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters and it's 100 pixels per inch or 100 pixels per centimeter, there's a very big difference between the two. So if it's 100 pixels wide in centimeters, then yes, that's not going to be very big at all. That's 1 pixel per centimeter. If it was 1,000 pixels wide but 100 centimeters or 10 centimeters, then all of a sudden you've got a lot more detail. So the smaller the pixel, the kind of better the resolution. So if I put that back to where it was as 10, it's much better. If I halve that again to 5, you can see that it becomes much crisper, and my sphere becomes a lot more faceted. And this is because technically a sphere in Cinema 4D is just a bunch of facets, and we cheat with something called render perfect, which is very similar to what we can do inside our volume builder. We select our sphere and we choose perfect primitive, and that will make it nice and spherical. But with this sphere, you can see that I can shove it together. I can do this, I can do that, I can move stuff around, and it will keep merging itself together. It's doing it a bit grimly at the moment, but we can change that with all sorts of wonderful things involve smoothing. But I'm not done here. So this is something that in theory we could have done with a bool, although we wouldn't have got the nice merge. So let's just round that out a bit with the close and open. And oh, look at that. The close and open, which is a sort of smoothing function, makes where it merges much nicer, which is much better. But it's still live. So wherever I move my sphere, it will add to that. So if I go to my volume builder, what I can also do with my sphere, I can subtract the sphere. And I get the subtraction instead. And so I can move my sphere, I can still change the size of my sphere, I can move it around, I can do really weird things, which is quite cool. The close and open doesn't really make any difference now, so I'm going to get rid of that. But what I could do is add a smooth. Woo! Smooth does way too much, so I'm going to lower the voxel distance and halve the amount it smooths, or change it to mean and medium. I'm rushing through some of these because they're not really relevant for the moment, but you guys can play with them and see whether you get better results. The voxel distance means the number of voxels that it will attempt to smooth. The iterations are the number of times it will think about smoothing. So you can see that it gets a bit better and a bit smoother the more iterations that it has. Now, I could have done this with a ball. Yes, it wouldn't have made such a nice sort of rounded shape as it would have done before, or as it does now. But also what I couldn't do is then say, hey, you know what? Let's add something. Let's add a torus on the top, stick it in the volume builder, and it will merge all of that together as well. So now I have this strange donutted shape that adds to the top. You've always got to be careful when adding things in after you've added smoothing, because it always adds it to the top. If I move it below the smoothing, you can see that it becomes a much nicer shape, unless you don't want it to, of course, in which case you can have it above and it won't be smoothed by the one below, but it will do the close and open because it's hierarchical. So depending on the order that you have this in will depend on the results that you get. If I move the smooth shift above, then it smooths it even further. If I move it below the sphere, then the sphere isn't rounded, only the cube. But if I put it above, then the subtraction of the sphere from the cube will give the FDS smoothing all of those, and then the close and open will do that on the torus, which I really quite like. So there are a number of things that this will do, and I can keep moving it around, and it is all hierarchical. So it's not minusing the sphere from the donut from the torus because of the order that I've got it in. But volumes will do something else as well. Let's bring a spline into the mix. So let's create a spline and put a spline in the volume builder. And now it's automatically made it thick. Now inside the volume builder, I can select the circle and I can choose the radius that this creates, which is really cool. And then I can move it up here and then I can merge it together and it merges with the stuff as it did before. Let's put it underneath the SDF open and close so that I get, look at that, nicer spaces where one merges with the other, which is, as I said and keep saying, really cool. Now, you can reuse objects inside a volume builder. So whilst the volume builder up here is my object manager and has the 4 objects that I have created inside it, if I select my volume builder, I have my list of objects again below. These are the ones that it is having an effect on, and I can tick these or untick these without having to remove them from the volume builder above. I can also re-add. So let's click and drag my circle back into my volume builder and it's created a circle in exactly the same spot. Why would I do that, you say? Well, what I can do, I can subtract, and I can, as I've got a circle here that's 2 and a circle here that's 12, I can make that bigger. So I can make the hole larger, okay? But if I put that circle above, you can see that it's got the same. So I've got one that's subtracted and one that's being created, but I want them to be 2 different sizes. The trouble is, because it's the same circle, it says it's the same radius. So I'm going to put that back down to 10. Fun things, you can add folders and apply certain effects to certain things in certain folders. So I'm going to create a new folder with the subtract one in. And now it disappears because it's its own one. So I'm going to subtract that, but it won't make a difference at the moment. And I'm going to use something called a dilate and erode. And the dilate and erode makes everything puffier. So let's add to union, and I'm going to remove the first one. It's always got to be above because it works underneath. So you can see if I turn that off, I can make this puffier, but it's only the one in the folder that it makes puffier, and I can control how big that becomes. Which I really like. So that's now making a nice hole there. And then if I make that subtract, it gets rid of it. And my one, oh, no, not that one. My one here that's adding a union, I put above, and now, quite coolly, the same circle is creating the hole with this. So that's removing it, that is subtracting. The circle is the spline. The SDF dilate and erode is making it larger than the settings that this has of 10 centimeters so that I create the hole. And then the circle is in there again, this time union, in order to make that. And because they're tied together, if I increase the size of this, it increases the size of the hole. If I move the circle, it moves the hole as well, which I really like. So you can really utilize all sorts of weird and wonderful things here, adding and subtracting and adding folders and smoothing stuff out. So let's add the smoothing at the top instead to make everything a bit nicer. And I get different shapes. And that's something that I really like, the ability of merging stuff together. There are a few caveats. I'm not going to lie. The geometry that it creates is somewhat interesting. So if I have a look at the ground shading with lines, you can see the geometry that I am getting is odd. And if I go back to my volume builder and I say, well, I want this at a better resolution, so I want my pixels to be smaller, my voxels to be smaller. I press 1, I press enter, it thinks about it. Wow, that is a lot of polygons for not a lot of space. Okay, it also makes texturing really, really interesting, because that's the other caveat. You cannot texture these individual components and it comes through, because the mesher is the object that is creating the well, the mesh itself. So you cannot do anything with this material wise unless you kind of put on a standard material that goes over the whole thing, or you make the thing editable. Now, that's fine. I can do a current state to object if I want to. So I can either make it editable or do a current state to object, which it will think about, doobie 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 doo. And if I just turn that off and hide it, I now have a polygonal mesh which I can select. But of course, that's a hell of a lot of polygons that I didn't really need. And just out of pure curiosity, let's have a look at how many. Volume measure, object information. That is 448,000 polygons. Ouch. Good luck trying to UV map that. So 448,000-ish polygons. I'm not going to do the whole thing. There is a really neat trick to the other one. The volume measure, right, why is that not disappearing? Hello? Ooh. There we go. Just took a minute to update. The volume measure itself has an adaptive polygon creation. At the moment, it's 0. But even just going 0.1, you can see the difference that it makes. All of a sudden, where it doesn't need that amount of polygons around the flat surfaces, it deletes or merges. But where I do need them for the curvature, it creates. Now that's cool. That's a bit better for a lower polygonally modeled object. And just out of curiosity, let's do current state to object. And let's tag, object information, 252,500. 252,500. So not quite half, but near enough half. And the difference that makes, and that was purely on 0.1. Now, you may lose a little bit of detail, not going to lie. So you may want to have a tweak of that and kind of go maybe 0.2 and see if that changes your polygons enough. You know, I can do that. So maybe if I go to 0.1 and see that it does get rid of some extra polygonal information, and see what even 1% would do. That's much better. But have a look at the difference it makes to the surface. You've just got to be wary about how much this may or may not affect what you're trying to do. So even at 1%, current state to object, object information, 118,000. That's a hell of a difference, which is really funky. Now this does kind of, I dare I say it, I'm just going to turn the volume off, hide that. This does give me better polygons, or rather it gives me less polygons, and depending on what I want to do to it, then that may be fine. It may not be. It may be that you think, eek, this is still going to be dreadful. How the hell am I supposed to texture individual parts of this? Or the polygonal flow is dreadful. Well, this is where one of our new fun toys appears. And this would be our, and I've got to just try and remember where it is. Our remesh object. Now, remesh has existed before. Yes, we've had it. That's not the big deal. the big deal is the fact that it now also has the ZRemesher code algorithm in there as well. So you've got the instant mesh, which is what we did before, or you have the ZRemesher. Yes, we have ZBrush's ZRemesher inside of Cinema 4D's remesh tool. So we can have a look, let it process, see what we can do, and then see what difference it's going to make to the polygons afterwards. And I'm just trying to see, I think I'm still on 100%, so it's not going to do much at all. Or rather, it will keep the same number of polygons.
Yeah, you still get your quad mesh, which is nice.
But I get a quad mesh, look at this. So same number of polygons, but I get a quad mesh, which may be easier to work with. I could, if I want, stick that at 50%. It'll think about it in the left-hand side. So now we're going to go to like the 200 mark, which is like the one that we had here, and then see what we've got. The adaptiveness, now I've got to try and remember exactly what the adaptiveness does. Increasing the mesh density in higher regions where it needs to be. So like issues with the eyes, where it thinks it's got to have more, it will put more. Rather than do completely uniformly, I can increase the adaptiveness so that maybe it needs them where there may be higher detail. So, but you may end up with more polygons again, which I really like. I think this is a really great tool to be able to have inside of Cinema 4D. You know, the ZRemesher is one of those things that everybody loves inside of ZBrush, and now we have that algorithm inside of Cinema as well, which is just awesome. It's been a bit more adaptive. I'm not sure that's any more pleasant. As you can see though, the problem with the ZRemesher in comparison to what I had before was it's now using a lot more polygons on the side again. There doesn't seem to be, sadly, a way of combining the two, which is to have a nice requadded ZRemesh with adaptive creation of polygons so that there is less where you don't need it. But hey, that's just me. I'm now being picky. Either way, you can do it. And you can do polygon count as well. So if you said that you want less, so let's see what this would do at 100,000 polygons. That's 10,000, that's 100,000. And I'm going to stick the adaptiveness back at 50%-ish. Oh, it's thinking about it slowly.
I was going to say,
Maybe
whilst it's thinking about it, there are a couple of questions. So you'd
Excellent.
already read everyone's mind, or everyone had read your mind, because they were first of all asking about assigning materials to different objects, which, yes, is the only thing that we are hoping for. We're hoping for it not to be the case at some point, but yes, unfortunately, there is no way to texture different elements whilst it is as a volume builder.
No.
Then this is quite an interesting one. So Mohammed was wondering, it's kind of like a bit of a triple question. One, does the volume builder mesh slow down the C4D render engine final result? So does it slow down rendering? And then two, how would you recommend to dealing with this and handle this? And do we have any solutions from our experiences?
Good
So a
question.
high poly count will slow down C4D. If you go
Yeah,
like crazy high, it will slow and it will lag. And then in my experience in then working with Redshift, if it's then trying to calculate the mesh, then yes, it will slow
I
it
would
down.
always avoid trying to render a volume mesh, if I'm honest. I would always current state to object and then render that, because otherwise the computer may attempt, Cinema 4D may attempt to recalculate the volume as it is doing the render.
Yeah,
A
a
high poly
workaround is
count
caching.
Cinema 4D can cope with a high number of polys, but sometimes it can keep re-whirring. I mean, you can actually turn that off on the volume builder. You can switch off auto updates and you can create a cache, which may make things faster. But to be honest, I would negate both of those and just make it editable, because you're only going to shove a single texture on it anyway.
Yeah, and Joel was just saying you could also like make it as an alembic if it's animated, and that's always a good
Yes, that's
workflow.
true. Yes, I wouldn't want, oh God, animating a volume builder.
I've done it with, yeah, I've done it in fog mode with like noises and created like an abstract look, and then yeah, definitely bake it as alembic, or yeah, or cache it in that case. Just do cache layer.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, so another one, so this is from Andrew. Is there a performance hit on how many objects are used? So you would probably know the answer to this more than I would, because I don't tend to use an excessive amount of objects.
Yeah. I think yes is the answer, because if you think about what it's got to do every time you have a new object in there, it's got to convert that object into voxels and then decide whether or not it's adding, whether or not it's subtracting. Are there any smoothing? The smoothing calculation then has to think about where is it smoothing, what is below it, what is in this hierarchy. So the longer this hierarchy is, and the more detailed the objects are, and the
lower the voxel size as well.
Yeah, the lower the voxel size, so the higher the resolution, the slower it will become. Yes.
Yeah, and like you said, I definitely find when you're working with filters, like Matt was saying, with like smoothing filters, those are the things that are really going to take a hit. And so a personal kind of, he was asking about tips for optimization. This isn't necessarily a tip for optimization. This is my tip for working, is I would switch off my filters. I would also not go to like a crazy low voxel size whilst I'm working, and then when it comes to then the final render and the final design, I would then switch on and do my filters and then lower my voxel size when I'm no longer having to like constantly be making changes and constantly see updates.
Yeah, because you can see if I try and move the torus now, it's just going, oh, I don't want to do it, because it's trying to think that it's smoothing below a dilate in the road, below an SDF Close Open, below a smooth. Whereas I say, if you can turn those off, it is at least, it's still laggy, but there is some response. But yeah, even just, I mean, I've just gone from 1 to 2, which isn't much, and it's already much faster because technically there's half as many voxels to have to worry about. So that's some tips and some tricks when working with voxels. Is there particularly, I mean, 5, you're going to start to get completely different shape. But look how fast, look how responsive that is. The one thing I do like about this, if I was to go crazy and say half centimeter voxel size, ooh, actually it's not, it didn't moan.
Yeah, do like 0.1 and then you'll get it.
Yeah, normally depends on the size that I'm using, that I've got. So if I go to 0.01, it goes, are you sure? This may take a long time. Doesn't say that it's going to crash, doesn't say that it'll kill it. It just says it will take a long time to think about, and gives you the option to click cancel, which is quite nice. So if I just put that back at 2, and there we go, I've got, much quicker movement. But the moment you put any of the smooths on, even if I just put the first one on, it's much smoother to have to think about, because it's got to figure it all out. Anything else?
Oh, Chris is wondering, what hardware are you running on?
I'm just using a Mac Pro, and it's about 2 years old now, so it's not amazingly snazzy, but it's just a Mac Pro. MacBook Pro, sorry, I'm not even on a Mac Pro, I'm on a MacBook. So it's not too bad on a laptop.
Cool. One final one, then I'll let you move on. This is from Niruban. What would be a good use case for volume-based modeling? Is it perhaps an alternative for sculpting? Can't see a future for UV unwrapping a mesh from a volume builder. So what are your thoughts? Because you are the master modeler after all.
No, if you want to UV unwrap this afterwards, then I pity you, to be perfectly honest. It's not something you want to do. As I mentioned at the beginning, I do a lot of 3D printing, and I do a lot of objects and props and things like that. So what I like to be able to do is merge stuff together that I can kind of go, hey, here is a handle of something, here is a leather bound thing around it, and then use the volume measure to merge the two together so I can print the effect that it looks like this handle is now leather bound. And because you can subtract and minus things, and you can subtract other objects as well. So if I wanted to, let's have a separate cube here that isn't even in the volume builder. Okay, but I can put it as part of the volume builder, and I'm going to remove it. So at the moment, the cube is over there, but my cube is separate. So imagine if this was a different object, and it will delete it. Now, I can even hide it, and it can remove stuff, but what's the purpose of that? Okay, well, imagine that it was, I don't know, say this is going to be a plug that's going to go in there, and another object is going to slot inside of it. If it's exactly the same size, then the issue that you have is that it won't actually fit. So the hole needs to be a bit bigger. So inside the volume measure, I can create a new folder. I can put my cube in there, and I can say you're going to subtract. Once again, I will use a dilate and erode. And I say this hole needs to be 0.1 centimeters bigger than the cube, which isn't really giving me much. So let's make it just 1 for this example. And it means that when I print this and I print the cube object, I know it will slide into there because there is a slightly bigger gap than there is object. And I didn't have to make a second one and make it bigger. I used the original. So if I decide, oh, actually, I want this cube to be this small or a slightly different size, it's entirely adaptive and procedural, and it's made it work. So I use volume meshing an awful lot in my modeling purposes now because of the stuff that I do for 3D printing. It's also really good for making what used to be very difficult to mimic were welded or injection molded things. And being able to create these, because you get that curvature, you get that line, has been a really, has revolutionized those sorts of things. I mean, we've got examples in bottles and things like that in the content browser, which I really enjoy, which may give you an idea of what you can do. UV unwrapping, yeah, may be a pain, but to be honest, you could create a second layer around, as you can here with the label. But the bottle is entirely, you know, the bottle is entirely volume created. And if we actually have a look at the bottle itself, it means that it can be completely procedural, which I love. So I'm going to turn off that. You can see that we've got the curvatures, we've got the shapes, we've got bulges, which we can turn on and off, so we can see a little bit more about what the filtering is doing. And you can have a look through this, turn off the tapers, and you can see that actually this entire bottle is basically made out of cylinders that aren't even editable. I mean, even this is a formula sweep. So I've got a sweep, I've got a formula that's in a spline wrap, turned off, and everything's procedural. Love it. I think the only thing that isn't is the cap, which is a bit of a cheat, but technically that could be done with a volume modeler as well. I just wonder if they made it editable. Hey ho. So yeah, there's quite a lot that makes. I love that the entire base is just made up of an array that looks like a pumpkin, and it makes the bottle up. So I think there is use cases for it. If you wanted to UV unwrap it afterwards, then you may struggle, is the quickest way of putting it. Anything else?
No, I think most are answered for now.
Sweet.
Cool. And that was great to see that. It's really interesting to see how like a series of objects that you perhaps like, I wouldn't even think of these, like a cylinder, yeah, I would think of using, but the rest of that stuff I'd never actually think of using to create a bottle. And
yeah, it's great. Like literally, it's just a bunch of cones and cylinders. It's entirely procedural. It's great.
Yeah, that's interesting. Also, we've just had a quick one in from James. How do you export for STL printing?
I would make the object editable, and then I would do file, export object as STL. And that's what I do. Yeah, you can select, you can either, in Cinema 4D, you can select the file and export the entire file as STL. But if you're like me and you create multiple versions, backups, files, and whatever, like I did with this, if I wanted to export, I would make that editable. So current state to object first, select that one, and then file, export, STL, so that I know I'm only exporting that object as opposed to the entire file.
Cool, thanks.
That's right. Time to move on?
Yes, I think so.
Excellent. I've got about 20 minutes. So one of the things that I built to show volume modeling, just because it was fun to throw together, is, once the volume modeler has finished its thing, this. Yay! I have been watching various Star Wars themed series on various channels of the subscription nature, and I was just like, yeah, why not? That's fun. As you can tell from the wall behind me, I have reference material as well. So I was like, hey, that would be quite cool. What can I steal from that shape? What could I do? What could I add? And I just wanted to show you how easy it would be to create something like this in a very short period of time using volume modeling. And there's going to be a little bit of audience participation. I might get your ideas for things and stuff, but you can see that it is entirely procedural. It is largely cubes, deformers. There's no polygonal modeling in here whatsoever. I've got wraps, I've got splines, I've got things like that, which is a great kind of fun way to put stuff together. So let's have a nose at what I did. This will not be to scale. So, or I mean, because already this is a 2 meter high Light Saber. You know, that's a commitment. So let's have a look at this. Actually, I'm going to keep that at 50. Sometimes it's useful to keep things in even numbers, and you'll find out why in a second. So let's start really simply. So I put this in a volume builder by holding the Alt key on my keyboard and then clicking it, and it automatically makes it a parent. And I'm going to do the same thing with the volume mesher and do that. There we go. I am going to lower my voxel size just so it gives me a bit better looking stuff, a bit crisper. Now, the biggest problem I get to start with is that my cylinder is only 16 rotation segments. And that's okay, but I don't have like the perfect primitive as I did with the other one. I mean, mesh points is just bizarre. Optimizing closed holes won't do anything either. So in the cylinder itself, I need to increase its rotation segments. And I actually do this by about 4. So I normally make 64, when I'm 64, the rotational value for doing things like this, because it gives me a much smoother surface. So I've got that. What did I do for the handle imprint? Well, I created a rectangle, and let's make it just, ooh, come on, 100 by 100. and move it forward. And I rounded the edges. Oh, not that much, because that's silly. There you go, 20. So then I stuck it in an extrude. Oh, wrong way around. That was shift. I should have used alt. Extrude. Dunk. There it goes, and it makes it all the way through. Obviously, I don't need 100 centimeters, so let's just make it 10, possibly 20. I like having a bit of room to maneuver. And then what did I do? I put this in a group because I'm going to use a deformer on it. And the deformer I am going to use is, you will have to forgive me, I am still getting used to S26 and where it's put all of the things. So 20 years of using Cinema 4D and knowing where all of the icons are is difficult to shake. I can't help it. And also trying to remember what the icons
look like haven't
changed. I can't remember. Wrap, there it is. It's not what I'm used to. And the reason why I said about remembering the radius is because it means I can fit the radius to this thing and it will be the same. And I'm also going to put that there, which coordinates should be -50. And that means that the front of this wrap should be the front of this cylinder, which is fine. And I'm going to put the wrap in the extrude. And then I'm going to move my extrude backwards. And you can see that it's kind of working, but it's not extruding. It's not letting it out far. So let's go back to my wrap. Let's go to my object. Let's lower my width, which expands that out, but that doesn't give me the nice curvature. And this is a little bit of a problem with the extrude and the object that I've used. So in my caps, I can change it to a regular grid and it's going to give me a bit of a better look. Also, my rectangle spline is adaptive, so it doesn't necessarily give me enough points. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ignore the angle I just changed. That was a mistake. So adaptive, let's call it uniform, and look at that. That is a much better, let me just hide the volume for the moment. That's a much better curvature than we had a second ago. So that was, if you remember, extrude, ensuring that that cap is a regular grid, because an n-gon is a little bit messy. So a regular grid, and then ensuring that the rectangle, what is creating it, has more points, and you'll find that you get a much better look. So let's put that in the volume measure, and that's going to go, ooh, let's merge it together. Isn't that pretty? No. So let's go to the volume measure and let's do subtract. Dunk. And that gives me, well, we'll sort that out in a minute. This is again down to the voxel size. If I make that 1, I get something much nicer. Okay, that's not too bad. So let's have a look. I can, with my extrude, I can make it taller, so that's a bit more handly, and I can make it wider so it goes round. And this is all procedural, you see. I get to play around with it. This is what I really enjoy. Yes, the surface is a bit dodgy, and that's where things like smoothing comes in. Look at that. I'm also going to hide the wrap because that doesn't disappear and that can get in my way. So that makes a nice, smooth, rounding kind of look, which, say, is really funky. And how did I do the rest of the grip? Well, I made a capsule, not that large, not that way, much smaller, much narrower. Dunk. Do you remember last week? It was last week. It was only last week. I said that, hey, you can use the cloner to make modeling, and you can. So with the cloner, I'm going to change my mode from grid to linear, and it goes up. Yay! This time I want 6, and then I can shrink the height that it goes to. I am going to shrink the radius because that's way too big. And I'm going to move that there. Let's just have a look at the edge. Using other views is helpful. So there we go. So let's lower the capsule radius to 5. 7. There we go. Cool. And guess what? I am going to make sure this curves. Now, in theory, if I'm right, I should be able to do that. but it didn't work. But it does curve them. So that's cool. So that's curved them there. But what I'm going to do is move that cloner more towards the center. And you can see that they slowly start to appear. Hooray! Look at that. Better grip. You can see that this reference is absolutely from the Light Sabers above me that I have taken. But yeah, oh well. The SDF smoothing is a little bit crazy. So let's lower the voxel distance. There we go. Increase the iterations. So it's a bit smoother, but it's not quite so expansive. You can also lessen that to 50% if you want. So we can do all sorts of weird and wonderful things, which I really like to be able to do. And then it's a case of what do we want to add? So it really is just throwing stuff together. So let's create another cylinder. Let's move it down. Let's move it here. Let's make it like that. So you can make those sorts of things, or we could make a cone. Brain. Let's turn it upside down. Let's do this. Let's change its size. Let's scale the whole thing and move it up. Now, why am I using a cone? I'm using a cone because the cone's top radius can be altered as well. So I can make things to a point and make it sharp and nasty if I want. So we could go evil with this if I really want to. Notice cone faceted. So cone 64. Okay, and because it's throwing me, I'm just going to turn off, I'm just going to delete the SDF for the moment so that it doesn't, some bits look smooth and some bits don't. We'll sort that out a bit later. But I like the cone. I can keep editing it. I can move it together. I can merge it. I can make it exactly the right size if I want to, of course, which is 50. And then move it down. And it should merge, which is quite cool. Okay, so we're starting to get, I don't know, it's an interesting shape. It's all sorts of weird. So question, what do we want on the bottom? Do we want the same sort of, not the bottle. I just want to make sure that I'm
We
not
have
killing
also
one.
just had, like, so far the comment of the workshop, Cameron's just put attack of the cones.
Love it. Love it. Excellent. It's the cone wars. Brilliant. So do we want something as simple as what I've got down the bottom here? Should we make it more evil and spiky and do weird things to it? I don't know. You guys, you decide. You've got 1 minute.
We've had some very out there suggestions. So James was saying a teddy bear shape on the bottom. So if we're going to go nice and friendly. And then Dimitrios went the complete opposite and said a wooden stick with a skull on the end. Andreas, a tiny Death Star. How long have you got, Matt?
Ooh, ooh, ooh. Tiny
Mike
Death
says
Star.
a disco ball.
Shiny disco ball. Maybe. I'm going to reuse the cone because, to be honest, I'm lazy and it means that I can do that and at least one of my radius is the right size. So there we go, something like that. And this is going to look really bizarre. Ah! I think I've just made one of those massage thumper guns.
I was going to say it does look like that.
That looks like, yeah, that's a massage thumper gun. I'm not sure I like that. So let's see what we can do to make it a bit more interesting. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a circle, of which I'm going to move. Actually, I'm not going to move down because there's no point, because I'm going to put it in a cloner. And I'm going to, once again, turn my cloner to linear, and I'm going to lessen the height of that quite considerably. And then I'm going to move it where I want it to be, which is about halfway. I may extend that out a bit. That may be interesting. And let's lower the radius of the circle until it kind of covers the ball. And then I'm going to put that in the volume builder, and that will make something that looks less like a massage ball, but still looks a bit weird. But this cloner I'm going to subtract, but I am going to make the radius larger. So it should start to eke in to that. So that looks a bit more interesting. Well, I think it looks interesting. I'm not sure if anybody else agrees, but at least it doesn't look quite as Death Starry. Sorry, as Massage Thumper Ball. But there's all sorts of weird and wonderful things that you could do with this, which again is why I like it, and what we can do with the Light Saber hilt and problems and additions, or, you know, it really is just a simple case of going, make a tube, shrink the tube, change its height, put it there, stick it in, make it 64. And we've added more detail. You know, there's so many things that we can easily do. Ooh, I've got an interesting one for you. So let's take some detail or make some additions to this cone down the bottom. And one of the easiest ways to do that is similar to the way I've done the cloner before. I can make lots of copies of something and I can make it go round. I can make a radial copy that goes all the way around this. But how do I get something that matches exactly the angle that this has been created? Well, we have an answer, and that is the wonderful placement tools that we have. So I'm going to shrink this down. I'm going to move it here. I'm going to move it forward. I'm going to make it smaller. And then I'm going to use my place tool to go plop. Okay, that isn't quite the angle that I wanted it to have. Or that one. Bah, it was going so well. So I might cheat, because at least I know one face is at least against it. So let's change my radius. When in doubt, cheat. Really?
That was so
Still
funny to watch.
the angle is the same, so at least I can do some detail here, which I can put that in there. I can do that. Let's get me a cloner, and let's put the cube in the cloner. Let's make the cloner mode radial. Oh, for heaven's sake. Let's not align it. Oh no, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? That should have worked.
What was it you were trying to do?
Why is my... Okay, I'm gonna work around this. So I like where this cube is in relation to its alignment with the angles. So I'm going to create a null object, which is the center. I'm just going to move that further down because that's going to annoy me otherwise, so it's near that. And then I'm going to put the cube in there. So the null object is now something that goes around. The null object is going to go in the cloner. That's going to go there. The cloner is going to have the aligns. And then I'm going to make the radius 0. And then you will see, haha, look, they are the correct shape. So this means that I had a cube that was in the correct position at the correct angle. The null object at 0 means that it is the central object, which is at 0, knowing the coordinates of its child object. Cloning that and then having the radial cloner of 0, if I did it more, it would expand out, means that it is exactly where it needs to be. So I can move the cloner up, put it in its shape, put it in the volume builder, and I can either add or I can subtract. And I get an interesting shape that matches exactly the angle of that. That's quite funky. I quite like that, actually. That's not too bad. Okay, what do we think? Have we got any other weirder suggestions about what we can do to this poor unsuspecting lightsaber?
I'm just sort of waiting for a few to come in. People are enjoying that workaround. They said it was interesting to see you come up with a solution live.
Cool. Good.
Demetrius saying
That's why I do
for
this.
Maxon.
Oh.
Electric potato masher. Is that what it looks
It
like?
does look like an electric potato masher, doesn't it? It does look. This thumper thing just looks dreadful. So let's
Devon was saying
do.
animal head,
No, I
dragon,
haven't got
spike
time
at the
for an animal
bottom.
head. Oh, dragon spike, more tempting. I've got to work on the actual blade emitter in a second. So let's just make this. I'm just going to make this 20.
We've had a few more suggestions while you work. I'll say them. So we've had an on and off thumb switch on the handle. Engrave your name on it.
That could be done. So I'm going to merge this down. I'm going to make these actually 10 by 10. Oh, look at that. It fits in between. Yeah, that's definitely happening. Happy accident.
That's cool.
Boom. So there you go. It looks a little less like a potato masher. I tell you what, I don't know if anybody else is this, but the world grid absolutely does my head in when I model. So if anybody else is like me and wants to turn it off, you can go to filter, world grid, although it's always work plane or world grid. One controls the other. So if I turn
I do the
off,
same. It's my most common button I press.
It drives me mental. It's always in the way.
Yeah.
So that looks a bit nicer. I'm more of a fan of that. I think that kind of looks a bit better. What did I actually do on the other one? I've forgotten already.
Matt, quick question.
Oh,
Place tools, version 24. Is that right?
Was it?
Coming 24?
No.
Was it 25?
I honestly can't remember. I seem to remember 25, but I think you might be right. I think it might be in 24 because it's in a different place. Yes. Yeah. God, did it come out a year ago already?
Thanks.
That's crazy. So yeah, let's do a similar kind of emitter. How long have I got? Oh, I've run out of time. Right, so let's go for it. Let's go for some. Why do something once when you can reuse it again? Let's do that. I like that. Let's get a cylinder, copy pasta, as some people call it. Shove that on there so it's the right sort of size. That's cool. And then the one that I liked was, let's get a sphere. Let's put all of these in the volume builder. Boom. Oh, that doesn't look good. So let's move the sphere where it needs to be, all the way up there. Yes, don't forget. Perfect primitive. Okay, great. So that's cool. And then what I'm going to do, weirdly, I'm going to reuse the sphere. So the sphere is in there twice. I'm going to use my trick of having a folder. I'm going to put my sphere in here. And then I'm going to use a dilate and erode. And that's made it bigger, which I don't want. I actually want to make it smaller, so -5. And then I'm going to subtract it. Now that looks really good, doesn't it? I can't tell the difference. No, you can't, because it's hollow inside. So how do we tell that it's hollow inside? Let's create a cube. Let's put a cube where we want the hollow emitter to, or the beam emitter to finish. Let's just make it slightly bigger, but not as tall. Put that in there, put that there, put that in, and then, last but not least, subtract that, and I have my bowl for the hollow emitter for that. There is my Light Saber. Thank you very much. And again, this is all tweakable because it's all procedural. Nothing is fixed, nothing is modeled, nothing is true. No, that's something else. But I can still play with certain things. So let's add my SDF smoothing back in. Where did it go? Oh, it was in my folder. I didn't want it in my folder. I want it in Cube, SDF Smooth. And it thinks about it. Oh, that's a bit goopy, isn't it? That's a bit too much. That's why I lower the voxel distance. I increase the iterations. And I will change some distance. Sometimes mean, medium, mean curvature. I can't tell you what the exact difference is between those. If you want to know, do feel free to look it up. By right-click and going to contextual help, but I think the nicest one there was mean. So it looks nice, it's merging together. You could do all sorts of weird and funky things. And there is that sphere is a bit large, isn't it? So let's shrink the sphere. And you can see that it does the inside as well, which is why I like this so much, because I only have to edit it once. Boom! There is a Light Saber for you.
That is very cool. Very cool. I was looking through some of the questions, some of the comments. Joe was saying it looks like an excellent shot glass, and I would not mind having a shot glass that looks like this.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be quite
room
fun.
for the alcohol though in the top.
Well, it's only a shot glass, so technically you shouldn't be gulping down shots, Ellie.
Don't out me on this live session.
It's why we're all so happy.
We're all just drunk the whole time. So Ryan was wondering, it's a good question as well. Are you able to use a noise to affect the surface?
I like that. That is a good point. That is very true, because you can. I'm trying to think what I want to do it under. So let's take the base itself, my original sphere. So I'm going to put this in a folder. Everything else will still remain the same. I'm just going to turn off the SDF smoothing so that it doesn't do too much. Then I'm going to create my dilate and erode in my folder, and I've made it bigger. 5 centimeters in this instance is a bit crazy. So if I just do 1, you can see that it is making a difference. Let's make it 2.5, so I've got a better difference. Why add a dilate and erode, I hear? Well, what you can do with SDF, dilate and erode, you have the option of using fields. And I could create a random field, because a random field is a noise. And look at that. I can affect certain parts of this if I want to. Now, a random field, if you just select, is, as you mentioned a second ago, something that I can change. So where is my brain? Oh, that's because I need to move this over a second. There we go. There is a noise type, and I can siphon through different noises to see what one would be better. Oh, that's cool. So I can make it. I mean, yeah, I'll be honest. That would hurt to grip. That's, someone needs some filing down there. So what I want to do on that, because I'm curious, let's invert that, and there we go. It's mottled. The volume has got a little bit unhappy just because of the amount of data there may or may not be. So if I just change that to 0.5, which effectively doubles the number of voxels, it's thinking about it, it's a bit smoother, and then I might have to add the smoothing back in just to see if it will sort that out a bit. Yeah, so okay, so now I've got a Light Saber that makes it look like it's made out of cork. That didn't work quite as well as I was hoping. But yes, you can use noises to affect the surface of things. Anything else?
That's cool. Well, I'm just having a little look. So a lot of people saying it looks great, and thanks for this. Frank was wondering, is the Boolean obsolete for you now?
I do still use the Boolean option if I categorically need very clean and crisp lines on a low poly model. So as you can see from this, look at the polygons, so many polygons. And it's always going to give me this curvature because that's kind of what it does. And even if I just update to my favorite 0.2, I get a lot less polygons, but I still don't get the exact crisp lines that I would get, even if I turned off the smoothing. So the Boolean I will still use, but if I'm merging stuff together and I'm going to print it, then this is what I do. Anything else?
Cool. Andreas was wondering, is there a way to get rid of the vertical geometry artifacts?
Do you mean these lines that are being created?
I would presume so, yeah.
Not easily, because it's basically it's pixelating an object. That's what's happening. You know, if you create a cylinder or create a circle in Photoshop, you can see that it is effectively lots of pixels, and the square pixels create this sort of anti-aliasing. The only way to get around that is by more smoothing. So I would have to create another smoothing that, can I smooth the surface first? Oops, didn't mean to do that. This is entirely a guess to see if this will work. Kind of, but
Could you try a smooth deformer on the whole thing and then use
that's
and sort of
kind
tweak
of
that?
what
So
that
that's
does.
done it, yeah.
Yeah, it's the trouble of using the fields, I think. I wonder if it's got something to do with the field itself, if I can change its scale. I mean, I can change its scale. I don't know if that would have an effect. I think it's because it's having, not only is it having an effect on the dots, it's having effect on like the vertical polygons. And I think it's entirely based on the type of noise that you used. No, it's still doing it. I wonder if I can, I don't think it's got anything to do with the number of rotation segments. I'm not 100% sure, but it's not actually an issue I've had before. So I don't have an immediate resolution for it. Sorry.
Cool. There's actually a couple of questions about 3D printing that maybe you could answer in the background, or
I shall. Yeah.
If that's cool.
Yeah, of course. Right, so that's me done. Thank you very much. I will now throw this at Elly, who will go through some volume rendering, volume fog, as opposed to me, which is SDF. And for those of you that are wondering, SDF is here, and you've got the different types here. So volume, there you are. Where are you? Where's your name? There is Elly.
Chuck it at me.
Enjoy. Yeah, I don't want to accidentally throw it at one of the other people here. So
yeah, I don't know how that would work.
they'd be very surprised when all of a sudden it says, "Hey, do you want to share your screen?"
Sharing their screen.
Right.
It'll be funny though.
I'm going to
let me just move. Cool. Cool. So yeah, thanks for that, Matt, and thanks everyone for all those great questions. Yeah, but what we wanted to do, we also wanted to cover, like we said at the beginning, a second topic kind of along the same idea of volumes, and this is going to be fog volumes and rendering volumes inside of Redshift. And so I've got a whole load of stuff that I want to try and get through, but if we don't get through all of it, I don't want to rush through anything. So we'll just sort of, we're going to start by first looking at the volume builder in fog mode, and we're going to create like a fluffy cloud, and that's going to help us understand the workflow. And then we're going to take that Light Saber model and hopefully find some time to do that. I know someone's already suggested to do a purple Light Saber, and so I'm going to just kind of, I'm going to out myself now. I've not seen Star Wars, so I don't know what are like the good and the bad colors, but if everyone's saying yes to purple, then we'll do purple.
That's fine.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. So let's get started. Let's get started and actually look at how we can create our very first like fog volume and render it inside of Redshift. So Redshift is going to be key for this. So the first thing I'm going to do, there's a few different steps. So let me just change my renderer to Redshift first, just so I know that's done and I know that's out of the way. And this output is irrelevant to this. I'm just going to do it so when I put my render view on the side, you guys can see my viewport and my render view clearly. That's the only reason I'm changing my output. And I'm going to start off by just adding my render view in now. So we can already kind of look, oh look, little preview there, here's one I made earlier, preview. I'm just going to drop that in there. So now we have like our layout set up. So let's grab ourselves a volume builder. And for this, we don't actually need the volume mesher. We just need the volume builder. And we need it to be in fog mode. And nothing's going to happen because we need to define the area that is going to be, or the shape that's going to be made up of our voxels. And so in our case, we're going to create, because we want to create a cloud, we're going to create a rough cloud shape. Doesn't need to be perfect. We all know that I absolutely am not very good at modeling. And so I'm going to show you how I would create and model a really simple cloud. So I'm going to grab myself a sphere and we're going to work a little bit smaller. So we're going to go like 30 centimeters, and standard rules, I'm going to switch off my work plane. So let's go maybe 64 segments, because render perfect doesn't work in Redshift. It only works for standard and physical cinema. So we do need to make sure we increase our segments for this. And then I'm going to make it editable just by hitting the C key. And my reason for making it editable is I want to kind of like squish it like this. So we have this sort of like squished oval looking a bit like Stewie Griffin right now. Cool. So from here, the only other thing I want to do is I'm going to do a little bit of deformation. So I'm going to grab a displacer, which is just one of our deformers, make it a child of my sphere, and then we can use a noise, which is going to go crazy, and just sort of make it something like this. Like I'm not too fussed about this shape for now. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Maybe we can sort of like just get that. Cool. Right. So we have a bit of like a like fluffy cloud looking thing. Cool. So we kick off our render view. We can see that because it is geometry inside of here. But what we want to do is we want to turn this into a fog volume. So we're going to use our volume builder for that. So our volume type we have changed to fog. So here, so Matt was working in SDF. So if we're doing our modeling stuff, we can work in SDF. But I'm going to be working in fog. You can also model in fog mode, and you have different blending modes. So sometimes that's what I do. But for now, this is what we're going to focus on. And then I'm going to drop my sphere inside of my volume builder. And then hopefully you guys can see that we have a couple of dots here. And what this is doing is it's basically filling this volume with voxels, these little dots. And if we kick off our render view, we don't see anything. So we don't see anything for a couple of reasons. So before we actually do anything else in our volume builder, we want to be able to see this in our Redshift render view. So there's two things we need to do. So the first thing we've done is we've set up, our volume, our fog, and we've set up our shape. Now we need to make sure we have a light that is going to affect our volume contribution, because a lot of it is to do with light absorption. And then we also need to set up our volume material. So Redshift knows that it's supposed to be a volume to be rendered. So let's first of all set up some light that's going to have a contribution on our volume. And so I'm just going to grab a dome light. This is kind of my go-to, and I'm going to drop in a HDR image just from my asset browser. And I'm going to grab, I don't know, let's just say this one here. Drop it into my texture and switch off my background. And we can tell that it's going to have an effect on our volume if we come to the details tab inside of our Redshift light. And this is the case for any Redshift light. So not necessarily a dome light, but the area light, spotlight, etc. Make sure you go into your details tab and you can see the different types of contribution it's going to have on your different things inside of your scene. So your diffuse, reflection, all the way down the bottom, we have a volume contribution. By default, it's set to 1. That's great. So our light is now going to have an effect on our volume. So that is our second step. But again, if we play, we're still not getting anything. And that's because the third step in this process is to create a volume material. And then once we've created our volume material, we'll then be able to see our volume inside of our render, inside of our IPR, and then we'll be able to start to make changes, make adjustments, and see those live. So if we open our material editor, I'm actually just gonna like play my render view so you guys will be able to see it straight away. I'm gonna create a new Redshift material. And these are sort of like our default base material. So normally we're all used to creating a material or a standard material. For this, we need a volume. And I'm just going to double click my volume and let me just dock this as well, just so we can see everything that's going on. And I'm going to drop that onto my volume builder. Cool. So we can see that this is now on our volume builder. And if we have a look inside of our Redshift volume, so inside of our material, we have our output node, which is going to output onto the volume of our object. And then we have a Redshift volume node. And if we have a look at our attributes, we can see that it's made up of three what we call channels, three main channels. We have a scatter channel, an absorption channel, and an emission channel. And we're going to have a look at these in more detail in a little bit. But for now, we just want to create our setup and learn the workflow. So still, we're not seeing anything. And that's because what we have to do is we need to define this channel in here. And if I hit my presets option, if you're used to working with VDBs, so VDB volumes, if you're used to working with exposure effects inside of X particles or turbulence FD, you may be used to seeing these channels here, and you can export VDB data with this channel information. What we can also do, if we scroll all the way down, we can see that we have volume builder as a channel option. And so what it's going to do, it's going to take the voxel data information, the range information between 0 and 1, and it's going to then define this volume information based on those values. So if we select that, we now have something in our render view. And admitted, it's not looking too great, but we're seeing something. So we have everything set up. And so from here, we can now start to change some things inside of here. So if we come back into our volume builder, again, our voxel size is extremely important. So this is going to be similar to like our resolution and our density of our particular volume, in our case, our fluffy cloud. So I'm going to drop this right down to something like 0.5. There we go. It just took a while to think about that. And now you can see we can see a lot more of the shape. We have a lot more of a denser fog volume going on. And so I'm going to stick to 0.5 for now because I want it to be pretty fast in the render view. If it ends up being a little bit too slow, maybe I'll increase that to like 1 centimeter. So from here, we can start to make some changes. And the way that we would want to begin to make changes is by using our filters inside of our volume builder. So we can make changes inside of the volume in here, but for a start, let's start to make more of an interesting looking cloud. So if we just have a look at these, we're not going to go through every single one, but I'm going to do a quick explanation of a couple of them, and we're going to end up using a couple of them. So fog curve and fog range map is going to allow us to remap the values of our fog volume. And so if I select my range map, we have a min-max input and output of values between 0 and 1. And you can see those are our white and our black dots in our viewport. And those are also what are controlling our scattering and our absorption, which is like our density. So we can see we have a much more dense area here, and then we have a much more kind of what we would maybe call transparent area. And so what we can do with our fog range map, we can control our max output. So if I want this to look more transparent, I can lower this maximum value to something like 0.2. So now the maximum output voxel value is going to be only 0.2. So we have a lot less density going on and a lot more transparency going on. We can do a similar thing by using the fog curve, which is going to allow us to, again, remap these values, but by using a spline. And so we have our values of 0 and our values of 1. And I always like to make this a linear spline, and then I can pull this down, and we're going to end up getting to a similar result that we had before. So we can now see that we're having a lot, more transparent cloud. So this is cool, but we're still not getting a realistic or more realistic looking cloud. But if we start to combine some different filters, then we can do this. So for a start, I'm actually going to switch off my fog curve. And then what I want to do, so when Matt was working with a random noise, he was able to add detail to the surface of his model. We can do a similar kind of thing by using a noise to add some variation to our values. And all that means is we're going to add noise almost to the surface of our volume. That's the best way to think about it, as opposed to getting caught up on our values between 0 and 1. And so the first thing we're going to want to do, we're going to want to use something called a multiply filter. And we can use the multiply filter to almost make our voxels disappear. So we can multiply the values by 0 and then they won't exist anymore. So the fog volume will disappear. Then we can bring them back by using a noise shader. And so if that doesn't make sense, I'm gonna show it anyway. I'm gonna demonstrate it. So hopefully it'll make sense after this. So if we go grab a fog multiply, we want to multiply our values by 0, and so they're all going to disappear. That's great, because once we've got to this point, we can then start to use fields to bring those values and bring those that fog volume back. So if we use a linear field to start with, we're going to end up using like a noise, but if we use a linear field just so we can see everything that's going on, let me just keep that on there. So now if we move our linear field, you can see how it's controlling the area or the fall off of that multiply. So we're able to kind of remove or appear some of our volume. That's not that interesting. So let's take a different field. And in our case, we're going to use a shader field. And then if we add in a noise, I don't know if it's super visible yet, but we're starting to get some of these areas that have now effectively disappeared because their values are being multiplied by 0. And so if we go into our noise, let's find a noise that's going to be a bit more interesting. And so what's happening here is everything that is being represented by 100% white is effectively disappearing, and everything that is being represented by 100% black is going to be our fully dense value. So we can choose any of the noises. I think displaced voronoi seems to work quite well. And then let's leave that on 100%. But what we want to do is we want to adjust our low and high clip to exaggerate some of these areas. So if I pull down my high clip, what that's going to do, it's going to increase the white values. So if I pull these down, we can see that we're getting more. If I pull it all the way down,
kind of looked like a brain in a plastic bag. That was quite creepy.
Oh, that's what we're creating.
That's it, a brain in a bag. Excellent.
Brain in a bag. Yeah, so as you see, as we kind of increase and decrease this high clip, we're able to remove more of this fog volume. And then we can do the opposite by pulling up the low clip and bring more of it out. So of course, to make this look like a fluffy cloud, it's going to take a lot more tweaking of this noise, but we haven't got loads of time. So I want to move on to show you kind of the next step on making this look even better. I'm going to leave it as it is, because yeah, I could sit and tweak this for a very long time. So yeah, so we've looked at our fog multiply. And then from here, we can reapply our fog curve. And so remember, our fog curve was almost allowing us to add some more transparency and remove some of this density. And so we're getting a fluffier looking or slightly fluffier looking cloud by sort of pulling this down. Maybe we'll sort of pull it up a little more to pull in a little bit more detail. And then the final filter that we can then do is a fog smooth. And so this is similar-ish to the smooth that Matt was showing. But what this is going to do, it's going to look at each voxel and each of them that are next to each other, each of those dots. It's going to look at the values of each of them, and it's going to smooth and blur between them. So instead of getting some harsh changes in values and harsh changes in density, which we can see, it's going to sort of smooth this all out and should, I'm hoping, create a more sort of like blurry, fluffy effect. So if I drop in my fog smooth, we can see if I switch that off and switch that on, we're now getting a much smoother result. And if we increase our voxel size, we're going to have even more sort of like smoothing and blurriness. But in our case, maybe we just want to do a value of 1, and we have a bit of our first fluffy cloud going on. And so for this, to perfect this and tweak this, I would come back into my fog multiply and into my my shader field, and I would tweak this a little bit more. But what's great about this is we can continue to tweak this. We can come into our displacer and we can tweak our displacer as well. So this was the workflow. This is the first thing I wanted to show. And it was how we can physically set up this. So the main thing here is, especially when you're working with Redshift, is to change your render to Redshift. We then set up our fog volume using a volume builder in fog mode. We then need to have a light that is going to affect our volume. And then we also need to make sure that we then have our Redshift volume material with the relevant channels in. So really quickly, we're going to go into some of these channels when we add some volume fog to the Light Saber. But what they are, scatter, think of scatter as like your diffuse channel. So I could recolor this by coming in and, I don't know, choosing like a different thing, and it's going to, oh, did that not work? I'm unsure as to why that is not working. This should just allow me to recolor. Here we go. Okay, it didn't like to load that preset. Not really sure why, but normally it should load the preset. So we can see here we can almost colorize our fog volume this way. Our absorption, think of absorption as our transparency. So if I lower this value, we're absorbing more of the light, therefore we're getting a brighter and more slightly transparent looking material versus a more dense looking material. And then emission is self-illumination or incandescence, which we're going to look at when we do the Light Saber in literally 1 minute. So are there any questions on this particular setup before we then actually do it on our Light Saber model?
I've got one question.
Yep.
Does the state node work with volume shaders?
What are you hoping to do and achieve with the state node?
I don't know. I've got a couple more. Can the noise then be animated to create a slow moving fog?
Yes, absolutely, it can. So we may come back to that state node situation. Yes, so inside of your shader field, you can come into your noise shader and you can add some animation speed. The key thing here is we do want to make sure we hit our frame refresh. And so I'm hoping when I press play, so hopefully you guys can see, I mean, it's slow FPS on my end, but hopefully you guys can see that, yes, that is how you would animate that.
And another one, is the only way to render volumetric fog to use Redshift? Can it be done in physical renderer?
I do not know the answer to that. Matt, do you?
I do. No, we don't have a fog renderer inside of Cinema. Redshift is the only way.
Oh, I did not know that. That's good to know.
We did have it for a bit with ProRender, but then when ProRender ceased, so did our ability of rendering fog. But now we have Redshift, so now we can render fog again.
Yes, so yeah, everyone should have access. If you have version 26, you should have a CPU version of Redshift, and it is the same thing. You can do all the same stuff. It is just a bit slower because naturally GPU is a faster way of rendering. So it isn't a different version of Redshift. You can absolutely do all the stuff that I'm doing right now, even though I'm rendering on the GPU as opposed to the CPU. Okay, so this bit done, let's go into adding some stuff to our Light Saber. Yes, so let me open up the that is okay, that's the full one. So let me just wait for this to calculate. So this is what Matt was saying, where it has to, when you reopen, it has to calculate the volume builder. So it's going to be calculating that and the remesher. And I'm going to show you what this looks like, because I know, I can't remember who it was, someone was asking to see a preview of the render as you were modeling your Light Saber. And so I thought I could show this quickly. It's still having a think about it, I think. It's here, it should be here. Hey ho, let me just kick this off then, just so we can see then the volume. This is what we're going to create, but a purple version. And so I'm just going to steal, I'm just going to steal the remesher. And what do I want to do? I want to change my render to Redshift. And it's just calculating the remesher. So I did that workflow that Matt showed, where I converted the Light Saber volume mesher into like a single object, and I dropped that inside of the remesh. And the original plan was I was then going to do some polygon selections for materials. So it's kind of maybe irrelevant now that I'm doing this. Maybe I will just pull it out. My SIM40 is being a little bit slow. Let's get rid of that. Not sure why it's being a little bit slow today. Still not updated. There we go, there we go. Okay, let's get rid of that remesh, and we have our Light Saber. So this is in the project files as well. This one that Matt created is inside the project files link, along with the version with Redshift materials and the fog volume, which we're about to create. So yeah, I changed my render to Redshift. Let me just control and change my output again, purely for the sake of adding my render view.
Just a very quick question for you.
Yeah, for me.
Do you change your renderer to Redshift with nearly every scene? Would it help you if Redshift was the default renderer? And I ask this because people keep asking this, and so there is a way of doing it.
So yes, for my personal workflow, it would be better, but as the sake of a trainer, I like to keep things as default as possible.
Okay. Can I just ever so quickly show how, guide you through how to do this, but you won't have to do the final bit. So
yeah.
if you start a brand new file.
Let me just get rid of that. Yep.
Yeah. So this is a brand new blank file. Change the renderer to Redshift. Yeah. And then under Window in Cinema 4D, go to Customization. And this is the bit that you don't press. But down the bottom is Save at Scene, Save as Default Scene. So this will mean that every time Elly, or if she pressed it, every time she loads a brand new scene, it would have the Redshift renderer as default. You can do it all sorts of things. So you can save that you different sizes, different settings, having a cube in the middle of your scene at all points, if you particularly want to. Save as default scene allows people to set Redshift as your renderer for every file. That's it. Now I'll leave you to it.
Cool. Yeah. Personal workflow, absolutely. That would make my life easier. But because when I do a training session, especially if I'm training like Redshift for the first time or like beginners in Cinema 4D, I try and keep things as default as possible, just for that reason. But yeah, that is a definite kind of good thing to do to speed up your workflow. So let's get to making this purple lightsaber. You guys are going to have to help me with like the hue of the purple because I don't know. Cool, right, so what am I going to do? Let me have a quick think about this. Okay, so the first thing I want to do, I want to generate and create the shape that is going to make up like the inner area. And then I'm going to create a larger version, which is then going to become the outer area, which is going to be our fog volume. So quickest way to do this, I think I am going to use a capsule. And so what was our height of this? What did we go for? So it's 368 is the height of that. So maybe what do we do? 750. It's looking a little bit weird at the moment. And then a radius of, this is going to be like the inner area, and we're going to add some emission to it. Oh, does it not look like this in the films?
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's go 20 centimeters. Huh? Have I not watched it? I don't know what you're talking about. Never seen it. No, never seen any of it. So it says everyone, please don't attack me in the questions area. Cool. And then I'm gonna do a bit of tapering, just so it kind of like goes like big to small at the top. So apologies if this is not physically accurate to what it normally is. I'm just going to make the taper child of my capsule, and then I'm going to fit to parent. Don't want any curvature going on, and then I'm just going to maybe do like 50%. And maybe we're going to want to increase our segments just so we get some nice smoothing going on. Cool. So it's looking okay. It will look a little bit nicer when we have some emission and some fog volumes going on, I assure you. So this is going to be our inner. And then we're going to create a second version, which is going to be our outer. And this is going to make sense in a little bit. And then I'm going to make my outer a bit bigger, because our outer is going to be what is going to be our fog volume. So now we need to do all those steps that we did in the previous one, where we create our volume builder in fog mode, where we create our volume affecting light, and then we create our volume material. So we're going to grab our volume builder. We're going to drop our outer into our volume builder, change it to fog mode, and then maybe change our voxel size to 0.5. Okay, cancel that. 1. Okay, we'll stick with 1 for now. Cool. And then grab us a dome light. And then in the project files should be a bunch of textures for you guys to use. And that includes a HDR, which I'm just going to drop in here and switch that off. final step is to create our volume material, drop that on our volume builder, and then don't forget we need to then come into here and we need to assign our channel, which is going to be our volume builder. And then we press play. Cool, so we can now see, that we have our volume fog inside of our render view. Maybe what I'll do, if we just sort of close that down, pull that down and get a little bit closer, we can see that a bit clearer. And now I'm going to come in, I'm going to do those same things that I did in the initial setup when we're going to add our filters and we're going to use a noise. But then we're going to look at how we can control things like emission and the color inside of our Redshift volume using like our scattering, our absorption and our emission channels. So first things first, let's add a fog multiply that by 0. Then come into our fields and add ourselves a shader field. Inside of our shader field, we need to add a noise. And then our noise is going to be this kind of crazy cool looking pattern here. And the one I found worked best for this sort of effect, I just want kind of like, you know, I don't know what we're going to call it, but some kind of like fog glow around the Light Saber, which I know probably isn't in the films, but I thought it would look cool. So if we do Luca and then we increase our global scale, and then what we need to do, we need to bring up more of these white values, and we're going to do it with the low clip and the high clip. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull down the high clip. And if you take a look in the render view, hopefully you can see that we're now starting to get some gaps and some areas that aren't showing in here. So if we go sort of 45, and then maybe we can like pull this up. Pull this low clip up, so we're pulling some of these darks up as well. And this is what we're creating. And again, one quick thing, if you don't know, a lot of things that use like random noise patterns have a seed. So if you kind of like the look, but you want it to be a little bit different, you can actually just change your seed value and we'll get a different noise pattern based on what we're doing. I won't leave it on 666 because I feel like that's like some weird bad luck. Cool, back into our volume builder. We're then going to just sort of either range map or curve just to get rid of some of this density. So add a bit of like transparency. Again, just change that to linear and then we can pull this down. Maybe a little bit more. A little bit more. And add in a fog smooth. So we have this going on. So maybe we just need to pull up a bit more of this so we can see it a bit clearer. So a lot of this is kind of tweaking personal preference, things like that. I don't want to spend too much time on like perfecting this because I want to get to the material. Okay, so I'm going to leave it like this for now. I think it's looking okay. It's looking okay. I'll leave it as it is. So now what we're going to do is we're going to control some of these different values inside of here. And so what I want to do first of all, I want to actually come down to emission, and in my emission, it's asking for a channel, and I'm going to put the same volume builder in there because then what it's going to mean is there's going to be more, we can control our values and change our emission color based on those values. So the denser areas we can set to a color, so maybe like the purple, and then the areas with more absorption we could set to like a really light purple, so it gives the idea that they're like the really kind of bright glowing areas. So if we drop in our volume builder, you can now see that we're getting these colors here. And so if I pull this down, I'm hoping it brings out more sort of different colors. Cool, so we're going with the purple, is that right? Is that the deal? So what?
Oh yes.
What kind of This kind of purple, lighter purple, this kind of pinky purple. Go on, Matt. I know it's your favorite color.
Oh, I would say it needs to be a bit darker. So bring the, yeah, a bit bluer and bring the V value down.
Like,
yeah,
bring the V value down like this. It's got, I mean, it's not going to be this color because Emission naturally is going to generate a brighter version of this color.
Lighter.
And then I'm wondering if I can then create a lighter version. Okay, no, that didn't like that. Okay, we'll keep that to keep that on black. Okay, so if I increase the scale, maybe we'll put a scale value of 1. So now we're getting sort of some purpley and some sort of like pinky areas. And this is self-illuminating. So you may not be able to necessarily tell at the moment, but if we come in here, it's actually illuminating inside of here. So then what we can do, so we've got about 10-2. Then what we can do is we can create a standard emissive material for this inner area. So you're probably wondering like what the inner area is. And this is just going to allow me to set a emissive material to it. And it's all going to add to this kind of like cool Light Saber glow effect. So let's create a new material. So we're going to go material, a new material in here. And it's just going to be a plain one. And we're going to drop that on our inner. And inside my Redshift material, I'm not worried about the color at all. I'm going to come over to my overall tab and I'm going to add some emission. So actually what I can do, let me come back into here. I'm going to copy this color. So I'm just going to right click, copy that color because I am lazy like that. And I'm going to paste it into my emission. And nothing's going to happen because we need to then control an emission weight. So if I put a weight value of 1, we then have a glowy emissive material going on. So maybe like 1.5. And then maybe the shader field, like I'm not super happy with how this is looking. Maybe something like that. See, I could just tweak this forever now. Okay, I'm just going to leave that on like 670. And then one thing we didn't do was adjust the scatter and absorption values inside of here. So our scattering value is just going to be sort of like our diffuse. So I can pull this down. And so we get a difference in that there. So we can see that we're having a lighter and brighter fog volume. And then our absorption, so if we want it to be more transparent, we can actually pull this value down. And so we can now see that it's absorbing more of that light. So we're getting this brighter glow. Maybe we want to go like 8.5 on here. And so if we drop on our metal material, or let's just create a very quick metal material with the time that we have. And we can drop that on our volume builder. Not on our volume builder. Drop that onto our volume mesher. And we want to come in and let's sort of create a metal and then maybe make it a bit more rough and do like a darker sort of handle. And so now if we do come in, we can see that it is kind of like a cool self-illuminating. And that's because of our fog volume and because of our emission. And if you're ever wondering how to create like a glow effect, so this looks okay, but we don't have that glow. We don't have that extra little bit of like, extra little 1% of seeing our Light Saber glow. We can do that really easily inside of Redshift by using a post effect. And we're not going to worry about going into post effects in detail. I just want to show you how you can create a glow in the same way that when you're working inside of standard materials, you can like switch on that glow channel in the material editor and you get a cool glow. So the way that we do that, if we just sort of like come over here, give us a bit more room, we can go to view settings or just hit the O shortcut. And then these are our different kind of color controls and post effect options. Bloom is our glow. If we enable our glow and then reduce our threshold, we should start to get a glow happen. And then we can control our intensity. And then we have our glowy purple lightsaber. And so this is the exact setup that is in that final project file, which is sort of this one here. The only difference is there is a slightly more detailed material, which isn't something we're going to go through, but we will go through it maybe on week 5 and 6, how to create this type of material here. And yeah, we can see my runner's having a bit of a mare here. And yeah, we can see that it's like glowing and self-illuminating on the floor here, thanks to our emission and our fog volume. So do we have any questions on that before? I know we've got like a few minutes left. I wanted to very quickly show you fire and smoke with VDBs. But did we have any questions on those fog volume things?
Really.
Okay. That's cool.
No, there was
Okay.
an interesting question which required a film reference, but I'm not sure. I think I've answered it. Although, is the noise fully linked to the number? So if someone, you had 666 earlier. If someone went to 667 and then went to 669, would it be the same if they went back to 667?
Yeah.
Is it the same generation? Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. So sometimes what I'll do, I'll flick through a couple of them. And if I like, for example, like 667, I'll go up to like a couple more. And if I'm like, no, I don't like them, I'll go back down to the one that I do like, for example, 667. Yeah, it would be the same. It doesn't like regenerate a new random noise pattern. Okay, right. So we have a few minutes left. So yeah, I wanted to like really quickly show how you could render fire and smoke. But the important thing here is we're not going to be creating the VDB. So if you've worked inside of XParticles or Turbulence FD or other third-party plugins where you can create an explosion or fire, more often than not, they have the way of exporting as a VDB or a VDB sequence or a VDB file. VDB files are then able to hold channel data and channel information. And what we mean by that is, if you are used to these settings, you'll know there is density, there is smoke, color, temperature. Then all of those things can then be controlled inside of the Redshift volume, inside of the scatter, absorption, emission that we just looked at. So there's actually a website called openvdb.org where you can download sample models and sample VDB files. And I've done that. I've downloaded a sample Fire VDB. And so I'm going to be working with that in here to show you. So I'm just going to run through this a little bit quicker than I did before, just so we can get to the actual settings inside of the material. So what we want to do, in order to load our VDB, we do need a Redshift volume object. So inside our volume menu at the top, we have Redshift volume, and I can see this because I've changed my renderer to Redshift. So if we grab our Redshift volume, it's then going to ask for a path, and this is going to be our VDB file. So what I want to do is I'm going to drop in my Fire VDB. And we can see in our volume import settings, we can see which channels we have access to. So in our case, we have density and we have temperature that we can take the data from. And I love that that didn't happen. So we have it in here, but I wanted to show it inside of the Redshift volume. So I'm just going to go to my path, go to my fire.vdb and open that up. Cool. So we have that in here. We have our bounding box and we can't see anything at the moment. And that's because we need to do those same settings that we did before. Drop in a dome light. Let's switch off our environment. and then create our volume and drop that on our Redshift volume. Okay, cool. So with that bit done, we need to make sure we then define our channel. And this is where, if I just dock this down here, this is where those different channels, i.e. density, temperature, color, smoke, can be put in different areas of our volume. So if I come into my presets, we can see we now have Redshift volume, because that's what we've just loaded our VDB into. If we're working directly with Exposure FX or Fume FX or Turbulence FD, you can select those channels straight away. And what we're going to do, so inside of here, in my scatter, I'm going to want to add my density. And so we can now see we're starting to get the equivalent of our smoke channel, so our density channel. So that's what it's looking like at the moment. And then if we come down to emission, because fire is self-illuminating, we would want to add our temperature channel into this particular area here. So if I go to presets, Redshift volume, my temperature, it's going to go all completely white. And that is because of this map here. So what I want to do, I want to load my preset and I'm going to choose my flame. I'm not sure why this isn't working. It is, let's try flame 1. I do not know why this is being strange. Let me just sort of throw in a color here. Yeah, so if if you create your own fire gradient, ideally I wanted to just load in a preset. That would work a lot better. Yeah, mine's being a little bit strange. So normally it would be nice to have been able to have shown this. Normally, if I load in a preset, it's going to load in those colors, and those colors are then going to match the temperature values inside of the temperature channel, and it would give the impression of fire. But unfortunately, it's being a little bit strange for me today, and I'm not really sure why. It was working earlier. Let me see.
It still looks really good. What you have there at the moment, I'm really liking, to be honest. So
yeah, it would look a lot better with the actual kind of flame gradient, but hopefully you can still kind of get a representation of how it would look.
Yeah.
And then yeah, again, we can stick to just the first 2 channels to create this sort of like smokiness inside of here. So yeah, I really wanted to quickly show just that final little bit on the last like couple of minutes. I know it does require the VDB models to have, but yeah, this is sort of like a more in-depth version of working with volume rendering to create fire, to create smoke and things like that, using the Redshift volume and the different kind of scatter and absorption and emission channels and the channel data as well.
Right.
Cool. Right. So I guess we can, if there are no questions on anything, I guess we can do a quick kind of roundup.
There are a couple.
Okay,
do VDBs render quickly, and are you able to scale it to cover a screen or scene? I'm not sure whether it's supposed to be scene or screen. Sorry, Ryan.
So scaling the volume, I don't think does work. Let me just sort of, no, so I didn't think it did. Yeah, so scaling this down, unless I can kind of fake it. Oh, yes, okay, cool. Yes, so in the coordinates of the Redshift volume, you could scale it down that way as a little kind of workaround.
That's cool. Question about the Redshift material. With the Redshift multi-shader under index, using the source input geometry ID, is there a way to change the ID numbers on an object with multiple textures to a particular ID number?
I don't think you can change object IDs. I think they are preset, aren't they? Object IDs are. I've never changed them before. I've never been able to change them. Is the purpose to have a particular material and a particular object?
Not sure. Maybe reach out to training@maxon.net to continue that conversation, and then you can figure out, I think, what you may or may not need.
Use like a multi-shader or a shader switch, for example, you can. There are ways where you can take the object ID, then with some clever kind of ramp tweaking with the black and white values, you could get the exact object that you want, and then use that as like the blend layer to then control that exact texture on that exact object. If that's what you're looking for, then yeah, that's possible. But yeah, training@maxon.net, hit me up and we can discuss.
Cool.
Anything else in there?
Is there a difference between using the newer node editor versus the older XPresso editor for the Redshift materials?
Okay, yeah, so this is a good question. This is a good topic, which I'm going to definitely bring up in the final week when we look more in materials and more into Redshift in detail. So the main difference is XPresso node editor, aka the Redshift shader graph, was the original default way of working. This new node editor is Cinema 4D's node editor that has now been kind of optimized for Redshift material creation, etc. The shader graph, if you're used to using C4D shaders, which I know a lot of people do, a lot of people who are coming from standard and physical materials into Redshift like to use shader baking, so C4D shaders. Those are not available inside the node editor. This node editor here, this current C4D one, they don't work. So if you use that workflow, then definitely you need to be using the Redshift shader graph. There are some other details that we'll go into a lot more in week 6 about like the differences. The benefits of the node editor is the main one is because it's now being optimized for Redshift. It's been optimized for the viewport. If you're working with noises, reflections, texture maps, previously, and also when using the shader graph, you don't get a very good visual representation inside the viewport like you do when you use standard materials. But if you're working in the new node editor, the C4D node editor, which is this one, you do get a more accurate material preview in your viewport, which is quite a big thing when you're working. So you don't always have to kind of render to necessarily see how the material is going to look. There are some other kind of like pros and cons of each. Sort of soloing is easier in the C4D node editor, but some people prefer the workflow of the shader graph. But yeah, it's something that we'll definitely talk about in week 6 because it is a very important thing to discuss. But yeah, I think it's also personal preference, which is the main thing. There is no right or wrong. I learned the shader graph. That's how I learned. Never used the C4D node editor ever since 26. I now use the node editor. So yeah, I'm experienced in both. So we can definitely talk about it and see what people prefer.
Last question. I'm not sure we'll have an answer. Creating a volume in Houdini and exporting the VDB out of that with custom channel data, are all of those channels imported and able to be referenced in the same manner as was shown earlier? Now, I don't have any knowledge of Houdini and what you can and can't export or what you can import, so I can't answer that.
Oh, as far as I'm aware, I'm taking this like as if it was the same as like exposure and things like that. Whatever data you export, whatever channels you export, I believe if you then apply it to the Redshift volume, you will then have access to all those channels in that same way inside of here. Let me just move that out of the way. Yeah, inside of here, you should then have the Redshift volume and all of those channels that have been imported in there as well. I only see density and temperature because on this particular Fire VDB, the only channels that were exported with the VDB were density and temperature. So yes,
Cool.
I believe so.
Right, thank you very much. We have accidentally overrun by 10 minutes, but as trainers, we never overrun.
Shock.
When we meet.
Cool, let me get back up this just so a quick preview of what we're going to be covering over next week. So the idea is we're going to be diving into working with simulation. Simulation is a really fun topic. It's something that we didn't really cover much of inside the beginners workshop at all. And it's nice because we get to dive into some of the new tools inside of S26. So in particular, rope and spline dynamics is a new feature. And so we're going to be looking at those, looking at how exactly this new type of simulation works, because it's very important for cloth now works this way, and in the future, more and more simulation tools will be working this way. So it'll be an interesting thing to talk about and learn. We're then going to look at a way of adjusting project settings. And this might seem like something that's like, hey, why do we need to do that? But when working with simulation, you can often come across errors, collision problems, intersections, and the new simulation settings allow us to control and fix these errors with a whole range of different settings. Again, we like to keep things as practical as we can, so we'll be creating a rope simulation. And then in the second half, we're then going to be learning about Cinema 4D's native particle emitter, working with forces, and then how we can render particles with Redshift using the Redshift object tag. And then again, another bit of practical where we're going to create a particle simulation. So it should be a pretty good week. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. It should be very simulating. Haha.
Hey, joke of the day. So yeah, first of all, thank you so much, Matt, for the amazing Light Saber workflow and also for sharing it with everyone and offering
You're
it up.
welcome. That's fun.
Great.
Thank you for your Redshift knowledge and your practical uses of all of this stuff. As I say, without you, we wouldn't be able to make the images look pretty. Modeling's my forte.
It is no problem. We're a good combo, good duo. And I also want to say thanks to everyone, first of all, that's watching us live, everyone that's still here, everyone that's watching on YouTube. We really appreciate it. All the great questions that you have and all the kind of lovely positive comments and kind of feedback suggestions as well, because that's important for us. We want to make sure that you're getting the most out of these sessions and we're doing the most that we can kind of to help train and educate and motivate you guys. So we really do appreciate having you on here with us, and it's been a pleasure and been so much fun. And don't forget, hashtag #HowMaxon if you do want us to check out your work on socials. We do love to see the stuff you're creating, so feel free to take the Light Saber, create your own version, create some volumes and create some emission, and it'll be nice to see what everyone's doing.
Right, take care everyone, see you next week.
Cool, have a good one everyone. And we'll see you next Wednesday.
Bye.